Hello and welcome to this edition of Matchi's Master Discussion. We're delighted that you joined us for today, and I'm sure it's going to be a practical conversation about innovation. I'm Freda Gray, the COO of Matchi, and apart from that, I'm a firm believer that it's every person's right and responsibility to actually innovate. It's also in their place of work. So if you're wondering why Matchi is actually hosting Matchi, which is really an emerging technology matchmaking company, why we're hosting a webinar on innovation, it's because we've seen kind of the real value of working with organizations where they have got an innovation culture. It's really the difference of planting in fertile soil when we do our projects. So to kick off, I'm going to just get the admin out of the way quickly. And then I'm going to introduce our innovation specialists for today. Our producer today is Sashrika Pillay, who looks after the Matchi's emerging technology firms. Thank you, Sash, for helping today. And then in terms of if you have any questions, please post that at the bottom of the screen. You'll see a Q&A box. You can also use the chat function to actually post some questions for us. So with that out of the way, the conversation is scheduled for about 45 minutes, but if you drop off, not to worry, because we'll send you a recording of the conversation. So now to our specialists. Qmarkets is one of the technologies on the Matchi platform, and I'm delighted to have Michael Stilger, one of the co-founders, online with us today. So Michael, if you could please give us a quick overview of Qmarkets and your role there, to start us off.
Yeah, thank you, Freda. So my name is Michael Stilger. I'm one of the co-founders of Qmarkets.net. Qmarkets is a award-winning and leading innovation software platform, ideation platform, crowdsourcing platform, basically helping large companies to engage with their employees, with their customers, and partners around ideation and come and filter the best ideas and then implement them successfully.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And all the way from Australia, we've got Susie joining us from the KPMG Australia. Susie, welcome. Can you give us a quick overview of your role in KPMG?
Thanks, Freda. Yes, my background is in organisational culture and behaviour, and not just large, but organisational change with behaviour. I've been working in financial services primarily for the last 20 years across large international banks and insurance companies, and recently have been working with how behaviours and creating that culture of innovation, how to do that within organisations. And so that's why I'm here. I've just returned from running our People in Change China practice for the last 5 years. I was in China, and now I'm back home in Australia.
Excellent, thank you. So looking forward to the conversation. So let's jump right in. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about innovation and the culture of innovation, and then on how do organizations develop the innovation capability. What are the typical stumbling blocks to create a culture of innovation? And then lastly, we'll wrap up with kind of, so what should people be doing differently? And I think there's a couple of really good case studies that we're going to look at in the end. So starting off, Susie, I'd like to ask you to please kind of, set the scene for us. So give us the context around innovation, specifically in the workplace.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Freda. I think at the core of what we're talking about with innovation is ideas. Is how does an individual, a team, an organisation, a cohort of people, how do they come up with ideas? And that's at the core of how we move forward on innovation. And if I think of a very practical example about that, you take Google Glass as an example. That took 45 minutes, and that was a couple of guys in a room, and they went and got a pair of glasses, and then they just got some, a microphone, and then they got these pieces and they duct taped it together, and it took 45 minutes. So it's not about having having complex systems or anything like that. It's about the idea. I think that's at the core of it. And then I'd say what is also about innovation that's really important is the nature of connection and collaboration. I know Michael will talk more about this in a minute, but if I think again of another practical story where one of my colleagues had a client who was, funnily enough, trying to make banana ice cream of all things, and this client said to my colleague, "Can you find a way that we could do this better, faster, cheaper?" And the partner went back and sent an email to people. This was 10 years ago. And he collaborated across his team to find the answer, and he took it back to the client, and the client loved it, and the client implemented one of the ideas that my colleague came back with. But the point of this story is, following that, what KPMG did was they developed a platform by which we can collaborate, which are across many organisations now, and we develop a lot of our innovative ideas through that platform. And funnily enough, we called it Brave Banana after the first use. So the other key component around what is innovation is collaboration, and these days it's very much in the technology space. So I think really that's really what we're talking about here. What do you think, Freda? Should we move on from that? Or?
I think so, but one of the questions that's in my mind, so those are two organizations where it's very much consumer orientated. Is it different when we're looking at financial services? Is it more difficult to innovate kind of, with a service, and specifically financial services, which is quite restrictive in terms of the regulations that they need to, manage and comply with?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're moving into an area which we'll talk a little bit more about, further later on, which is around how do you actually manage across the organisation. But certainly, financial services institutions have innovated. There is the ability to do that. I think that there are some challenges, though, with the nature of bureaucracy, with the nature of investment commitment, all of those sorts of things. But from a cultural perspective, the key component from what is innovation is about having the ability from a cultural perspective to have that ability to innovate as close as you can to the front line, I think, whatever that front line might be, whether it's in banks, banking tellers, insurance, the advisors, those sorts of things.
Indeed. So, and that also kind of brings the whole thing of employee innovation and getting the employees involved. Michael, so maybe that's a good time to kind of move on and talk about kind of creating, the capability to innovate within an organization.
Yeah, I mean, it's great what Susie just said about collaboration, and some very good examples in terms of the financial services. There, there's very much a trend to move away from product centric to customer centricity, and that's a new journey for a lot of the financial services industry, and to not just come up with the next new insurance package or the next new interesting loan, just packaged differently than the previous one, but very, very much focused on what the customer needs, and here it's absolutely important to take everyone on board. So this could be, as I mentioned earlier, this could be your customers or your partners, but as your question is specifically around employee engagement, it's it's wonderful if you need to foster a culture of innovation, that you help your employees to see how important innovation is for the company, and you give them a tool where they can engage, where it goes also beyond the front end. Many organizations make the mistake that they're happy when it stays on the front end. We have 100 ideas, or we have 200 ideas, and we have a few thumbs ups and some thumbs down votes and a couple of comments, and that's it. But innovation is about an innovation process, and to go further down into the funnel, into the process of evaluating the ideas, of discussing the ideas, and then actually implementing them to make actually a real change. And for that, from our experience, next to the culture, next to the workshops, next to the people engagement, you need a solid platform to do so.
So the platform is really there. I think, referring back to what Susie said about the collaboration, because I want to challenge you on that. I don't think a system can actually, bring a culture of innovation. It's a tool that supports it.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, we don't have a slide, but I compare it with, with a triangle where you on top of the triangle have, if you scaling innovation, because at the end of the day, let's face it, most companies are innovative in silos, but it's about creating the, everyone to participate. So scaling innovation is really the aim. And then on the two other ends of the triangle, you have the cultural side, and on the other one, you have the technology side, as you said, you call it, Freda, earlier. And they need to both move together. And as they move together to the top, the closer you come to scaling innovation. So absolutely, they need to get hand in hand. Just a system won't do it, or just running a few workshops and a nice speech about culture won't do it. So it needs a joint effort to reach the point where you can actually scale innovation.
And then I'd like to kind of just ask you about the incentivizing of employees. So tell me a little bit about that in terms of how does that contribute to kind of really getting employees to innovate?
So from our side, when we have large financial services organization using our platform to incentivize employees, we get, it really depends on what kind of an understanding an organization has. We have in Europe, you have much more of a financial incentive-based system, while in the US or in Australia and other parts of the world, you have more of a soft reward system. So you have more, when I say soft reward, I mean, cinema
recognition.
Yeah, recognition. Yeah. So, things like, I don't know, in New York, suddenly you get for a month a parking slot in front of your company, large bank in Manhattan or something like that. So something that, where parking is premium. So they're both ways, and you should be able to, capture both ways, where you can either reward them directly or more recognize them through soft rewards, or dinner with a CEO, participation in an innovation event, and so on.
Okay.
I think an interesting point to make around the incentivizing the innovation culture is that it does have to be different so that it's seen as different, if that makes sense. And Michael quite rightly listed a number of options that you can use. However, if you're doing the same thing, like the comment on the very first slide, if you're doing the same thing in the same way, then people just don't really pay much attention to it. So that incentivization should be something that's quite different from what you're used to.
So can you give us some examples of that, Susie?
Well, the one that popped into my head, again, it's my own company. I should look more broadly, but if I go back to that Brave Banana story, when they set up the platform, they offered to our country carrier airline is Qantas, and they offered us 2 tickets on Qantas to anywhere in Australia we wanted to go to. Now that was just, my company had never done that before, ever. And so everyone was going, wow, that's fantastic. I'm going to have a go at this, including the senior people.
Okay. Well, that's, if you can get everybody mobilized, I suppose that's really a great way to go.
I mean, we have a lot of. I love the example from Susie, and for some of our customers in the US or in Europe, they laugh at it, but we have actually an Australian customer that gets them their employees diving with white sharks. So that's that's something all the Europeans, the Americans go, wow, can't really comprehend that, and what are they doing to the employees? But it's a very much an adventure-driven culture in that organization, and so it's cool. For others, it's extra holidays, or others it's a weekend in London, or just literally simply just and that's what we find with our is actually the biggest reward is intrapreneurship. So to actually get the chance to take your idea from the beginning to the end and be part of the implementation of the idea, to get a month off from work and help. We had a customer. They had an idea. They're a big, fast moving consumer goods company, and he introduced a new technology around drones, and he was for a month could test fly drones and implement then a solution around that. So and that was the greatest satisfaction. So that whole concept of intrapreneurship actually moves more and more towards being the greatest reward there is.
Absolutely. I can really understand that, because that also, I think, Michael, you mentioned earlier, kind of an idea is really great, but it doesn't really help if it stays an idea. It has to be implemented, and part of that satisfaction from an employee's perspective is the fact to see that it's actually come to life, and it's real. It's really made a difference in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So if we move on, I'd like to kind of, Susie, come back to you in terms of, so this is probably kind of the more important thing. So what are the things that an organization actually needs to get right, needs to really understand and do right in order to get to make innovation successful in their company?
There are a number of critical success factors, and I've outlined it on the slide there. I think from a behavioral change perspective, no matter what the change, whether it's creating a culture of innovation or transforming the way you work, the leadership commitment has to be the major component of moving that organization forward. Now, what does leadership commitment look like, I think is the critical question. And we often hear this expression around walking the talk, if that makes sense. But what it really is that there's a congruence in message between what you say and what you do. And that actually is quite difficult to do consistently across a large number of people in an organization. But that is critical to changing behaviour, is leadership commitment. And with that commitment obviously comes investment, and I'll talk about some examples in a minute. The other point I've got there on the slide is around bureaucracy busting. So we find, and I've found this over the years in any change situation, but particularly around creating a culture of innovation, is having to navigate the organisational politics and the roles and the hierarchy and who owns what, and how do you actually navigate your way around that to shift an organisation, whether that's a small or a large organisation. The more agile and more nimble and more smaller an organisation is, the easier it is. But busting that bureaucracy is really important. And then finally, the critical thing supporting all of this is around tackling the organisation's assumptions. So this is, again, very much around what at an organisational level people say they value and what they think is important, and then what they do is sometimes quite different. So really challenging that basic underlying assumption of the way things get done in a particular company. What does the company really reward and value versus what they say they do? And there's often differences, and that's for a range of reasons. It's not bad people doing bad things or anything like that. It's just the evolution of, you know, the way that the organisation has come about, and people come and go into jobs. So you really need to look at that basic assumption. Now, if I use an example around all of these things, I think it's really quite interesting. We did some work in Asia with a very old and traditional consumer company. Well, they're a large conglomerate, really. They've got a number of industries, and it's quite traditional. They're headquartered out of the UK, but also they have a strong base out of Asia. And when we meant to meet with the client, it was very old school. The office was all in mahogany, and came in, was offered a cup of tea in like a cup and saucer, and you know, I was addressed as Miss Quirk, and it was Mr. Such and Such. So it was very old school. And the conversation started off by saying, we'd like KPMG to help us create a culture of innovation. So automatically my mind has gone to, okay, and they said, we've got money, we're going to invest in this, and the CEO is on board. And what went through my mind was, okay, having the investment and having the leadership commitment is absolutely important, but you're sending a message about the way that you work by having this particular environment, and you have people that behave that way and you reward them for that. So there was this automatic mismatch, if that makes sense. So what the organisation really valued versus what it's saying it wanted to value was very different. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
That makes absolute sense, but now I'm fascinated to hear what the outcome was. Were they able to actually, you know, pull the two things together?
Well, funnily enough, Michael will find this quite funny. We made suggestions around in their automobile line of business. We said, you have to get to the front line of people, so the people that are making the cars, and you have to put in place a platform, because you're a global company, and you have to put in place a platform where you can ask for ideas and reward and incentivize for ideas. Well, of course, they said, well, that would be very difficult. We've never done this before. How are we going to do this? You know, this, I can't imagine all of the people in all the different countries going online and putting ideas forward. And, you know, so that nature of challenging the structures, the processes, the way people behave was already there. So we ended up compromising, and we had a pilot, and we did a small part of their business, and it really was quite good. But like many of these things, it tapered off, for want of a better word, because it's really hard. Michael, I don't know if you've got a view about this, but it's really hard to actually create that innovative culture. It's a fundamental, complete shift, if you know what I mean, and it just takes all of your energy, all of your people, and a fair amount of your strategic direction.
Yeah, Susie, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's you know, and I love the slide you put up there. I mean, it has to be leadership driven. You know, we see it when there is a ideation contest, and leadership looks at the ideas and comments on the ideas, and leadership doesn't do anything about it and stays out of it. The difference you should see in the level of engagement, amount of ideas produced, quality of ideas produced is huge. And it definitely needs to be driven. And I also, you know, the whole concept of beliefs and values and assumptions. So take you know, a good example is take failure. For us as individuals or as people, failure is something negative. In innovation and in an innovative culture, you encourage failure. You encourage early failure. Yeah, with you know, it's a classic Silicon Valley type of concept of fail early. So this clashes in our minds. Failure is failure, while in an innovative culture, failure is actually success. And so it takes that this culture really is, encourage people and is led by leadership. And then on the other hand, a really useful, engaging tool also that has mobile options where you can, capture mobile ideas. That together, I have seen great things happen when these things happen together, driven by leadership. But one or the other, you're absolutely right. It struggles. It can dry out.
Exactly. And if I add that there's a next piece to that story, and you were talking about it before with implementation, and that's really around the bureaucracy busting. So it's one thing to, let's say you get the ideas, whether it's through mobile and it's spontaneous and you've got leaders online, you have a jam session, it's all happening. And you get to that point, but then the organization runs out of energy because people are too busy. The running a business and changing a business is very hard to do simultaneously, and particularly around innovation. So you mentioned before, which is critical, which is around taking people out and getting them focused on this to actually drive that change. And it's from a behavior perspective as much as it is from an implementation of an idea perspective as well. So, something that I wrote in the article, the Frontiers article, that sort of talked about this, these innovation labs. And of course, it's not a new concept, but again, pulling out the right people from the business, turning them away for 6 weeks, but having innovation labs going all the time, and that the leadership team are constantly involved in them as well, that actually helps to drive some change, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the innovation labs is critical. I totally support that. One additional observation I've made is that within a system you can assign roles and responsibilities, so you can create actually a online innovator catalyst network, so to speak. And if they drive it, if you have innovation specialists and innovation champions and innovation gurus, or whatever you want to call them, you have this network that drives it, and that supports all the other underlying activities. I think it's a formula for success.
I think that's true. And I mean, I've seen a real life example in the financial institution that I was working before. They had a process and a system where they actually had champions, and they were really driving innovation, and it was on the strategic agenda and on the leadership agenda kind of most of the time. But I want to come back because I was really stunned by the statistics, Susie, that I saw in the Frontiers of Finance, in terms of 70% of the culture is actually driven by the leadership. Mm-hmm. So, and that's, and that consistency that both you and Michael were talking about, in terms of, understanding in your logical, rational mind that innovation is good, and ultimately the benefits of that, it outweighs kind of, the busyness of today and trying to just cope with kind of the meeting the deadlines and the targets of today. But it really takes, I don't know. I mean, what would be? That's a difficult thing to do, even in communication.
Yeah, I should put some context behind that statement. So, what we find is that many organisations tend to spend their times on focusing on the levers that change the organisation. Now, a lever is something that you can pull that will have an impact. So reward, remuneration is one. It's the most obvious one. Performance is another. Training is another one. Educating, learning, training is another one. Changing the structure of an organisation. So when companies want to change, they tend to focus on that side. And if I had a visual, I would put them on the right hand, or I just put them on one side, and that's what I would call those levers of change. And then on the opposite side, I would put this concept of leadership and leadership commitment. And we've made an arbitrary figure here, because what we want to show is typically organisations spend 70-80% of their time on the levers and about 20-30% of the time on the leadership. Whereas what we know and we've seen it, is it if we spend our time with the leaders, we guide the leaders, we help the leaders, we get the leaders involved, we look at leadership as a concept throughout, a vertical slice of a company, because it's as much at the front line as it is at the top of the tree. Looking at what do you do with those leaders, and you get a quantum of change by focusing on that side. So that's the context behind that statement. And if I think of an example, I worked with a very large global bank, and with the CFO and the direct reports, and we did a year-long project around the culture, changing the culture, and it was very much around how do we get innovation into the way that we work within a global finance function. And what we soon discovered, that if we focused on the top of that pyramid that's on the slide there, structures, processes, and behaviours, we would get so far. We would have a branded program, we would have something that people would know about, etc., etc. But would we get real change? So then we went a layer deeper, and we spent a lot of time with the leadership and challenged them. It was very frank and fearless challenge around how did they want this function to operate. But what we found is, once we talked to those leaders and we found out what their basic assumptions around what they valued and how they actually operated in reality and what people saw, that's where we had to target and change. And that's when we started to see some incremental change around some of the ideas being implemented, people being freed up, people actually wanting to contribute, knowing that it was of value, all of those sorts of things. The language started to change. That was a big thing.
Okay, I think that's a great point to kind of lead us in. So, Michael, I know you've kind of got a couple of stories to tell in terms of companies that are doing it differently. And I think that's then for us a good place to start and say, so how do we do things differently?
Yeah, I mean, there are many beautiful stories that we can observe and see. And before I mention one or two of these here, you've seen a great, because we're talking financial services, you've seen a great change in sort of public knowledge. That's why I can mention them. Bank of America, where they suddenly started giving the credit card out for moms, and they were rounding down the credit card bills, or when they were doing the customer experience walkthroughs in their branches and so on. So they're once that customer centricity, that customer experience takes center, especially design thinking, using design thinking or whatever methodology is, and Susie is the expert there. It's great, but it's all about scaling it. So, for example, in Total's case, it was they wanted to engage with all their consumers on the fuel stations. Or in Amer Sports, they do Wilson tennis racks and some of the large skiing brands, and they wanted to. So it's a heavy manufacturing company. They wanted to engage with their blue collar workers. Let's say you have this buy-in from management, you have the support, you have the leadership that drives this. But you still need to reach, whether in the it was Total or Amer Sports, they needed to reach blue collars. Total needed to reach consumers. You need to have a tool to do so, to then also sustain the initiative leadership gives you. There's budget there, there's time, effort. And they need to see analytics. They need to see measurable return of investment. and not just a nice marketing stunt. And so we, again, bringing it back to the point we talked about earlier, this combination of having a leadership focused drive, and then combining the culture and a tool that actually can scale it, that makes it a successful project challenge when all these elements come in and are combined.
So the tool actually, if I understand you correctly, kind of it goes back to that old quote of you cannot manage what you don't measure, and the tool actually gives you part of that ability to actually measure and see the participation and kind of see the impact.
Yeah, it gives the participants the feeling that they are suddenly in a team. They're not alone. You can submit an idea. People join as an idea team. Create a virtual team. We have customers that they're 10, 20, 30 nationalities in different global parts of the organization come together and collaborate on one idea. They share financial models, spreadsheets, PowerPoints, links to videos, bring this all together and come up with ideas, and then it gets pushed to the next level. These ideas get evaluated. The questions come back. The ideas get pitched in front of maybe in a Shark Tank kind of scenario, Dragon's Den, I think it's called in America, and then eventually the ideas are implemented and measured, obviously, for their return of investment. What difference did this idea make? Was it an incremental saving? Was it a new product that made us money? Did it boost our brand, and so on? So the tool takes you literally from the initial spark of an idea through the whole process of measuring the success of it.
And I think that's great. But so there's two things that I want to touch on, because if you want to, there's a lot of talk about innovate. Your company has to be innovative. It has to kind of drive the culture of innovation. But what's the real incentive for organizations? And I mean, it's a question both to you, Susie, and to Michael. Kind of, I think that one can measure it kind of, first of all, on the level of the employee and employee engagement and kind of, that way. But there has to be a hard financial benefit as well. So, Michael, maybe we can start with you in terms of, driving that. Can you give us some examples of, what is the real value, the business value in doing innovation?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of real value, so all I can say is, for example, one of the largest discounters in the world, one of our customers, they launched an idea challenge to 50,000 employees, within 3 weeks they had 1,200 ideas. And if you take that, 1,200 ideas means nothing yet. But then they had, they were engaged from the leadership. They had champions coming through there, and they found, some gold nuggets. And within these ideas, there was actually one idea that now, by 5 different experts, is valued at creating additional revenue of $570 million US dollars every year. So, of course, that's an extreme example. Of course, I would mention that, but all I'm saying is, within a few ideas, a few weeks, a few months. Of course, there's others, more on the manufacturing side. They look more for incremental process innovation, and they have 30,000 ideas per year, but each little step of improving something brings them a few dollars, and then the combination of that also amounts up to several tens of millions. So it's but in the end of the day, we see if it's if followed what Susie said, if this combination of the tool, the culture, the leadership, if everything of that, what also you mentioned, Freda, comes together, we have not seen this fail yet. We have seen for all of our customers great return of investment if they follow that successful formula. If as soon as one is missing, the leadership is not there, the cultural initiative is not there, or the tool is not there, we see it's not working.
And I think if I can just add to that, I think the other point that alongside the return on investment and following on from those 3 points that you need, Michael, is the relevancy. The incentive is to be relevant, and I'm reminded of what's happening in the insurance industry around many of the disruptors that are coming to play, the online insurers that can do automated underwriting and all that sort of stuff. Lemonade is a very good one. It's a crowdsourced one, and it's growing incrementally, year on year. And that's a real challenge to the traditional insurance companies. So I think the other point is that it's either it's innovate or not be relevant. So there's a strong incentive from that perspective, and banks and financial services in general are very much really in that space of how do we innovate.
Yeah, I mean, one of the largest Swiss bank customers we have, they did exactly so. I 100% agree. They did exactly what you just said, Susie, when they said, okay, for our wealth management side, we really struggle. Everything jumping online. Everybody offers wealth management services now, and they ran a specific challenge, a platform reaching out to all their employees saying, how can we differentiate ourselves from the online offerings that are coming up everywhere in the wealth management sector, and the result was fantastic because the topic was relevant. It was exactly like you said. It was relevant to the employees, and they jumped on this. The quality and the quantity was superb because there was a superb topic. The other topic, there was another large Swiss bank we worked with, and their topic or their challenge was, how do we become the best bank in globally? And that was so not relevant that the best idea came with something about get rid of the glossy magazines in the investment bank. That was the top of the idea. So relevance is, I totally agree, is absolutely crucial.
So what I find interesting about your examples, Michael, is that kind of, confirms my belief that employees on whatever level they work, they actually see and they notice the problems that their company has and how they compare, in the market, and what are the things that they're doing well and what are the things that they actually should be doing differently. And by creating the opportunity to actually innovate, you then kind of give them kind of the way where they can express that and where they can come with solutions. So, but that comes back to my point, and my question to you, Susie, is kind of in terms of creating this culture of innovation, to what extent does it have a real impact on for example, in managing talent, so making employees stay longer, making them more productive? Does it have an impact on that?
I think it depends on the organisation, to be perfectly frank. What we're finding across organisations now is that there is a global war for talent in particular areas, and with our ageing population. And what we're finding is that people need to be more targeted around what is the value proposition for an employee. And it will be different for different groups of employees. So some groups of employees probably don't care about innovation, to be perfectly honest, and their role is not aligned to that, and therefore, the focus for them is very much perhaps around process improvement, if that makes sense, which is completely different. So, you know, creating that culture and the impact on talent, I think, is is good in one way, but we can't be flippant about it, is what I'm trying to say. You know, everybody wants to work for a Google, but, you know, I'm sure Google has their problems as well, if you know what I mean. It's not always the draw card. However, in saying that, I think all employees would want to work for an organisation that focuses on trying to find new and better ways of doing things and developing new solutions and all of those sorts of things. So it is a key component of an organisational culture, if that makes sense, rather than a talent management strategy.
Great. Okay, so I think we're just about out of time. Any last thoughts, Michael, from you?
Well, I appreciate really good questions, Freda. Thank you, Susie. It was wonderful to hear your insights. Very good. From my side, I just you know, want to re-emphasize how critical the combination between a leadership drive, the culture or the strategy is, and then combine that. And now speaking egoistically because I'm representing the tool here, combine it with a great tool. And anyone who's watching this, obviously, we would love to hear from you about your stories and how maybe we can help. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Michael. Susie, from your side.
I think my final parting words are around. If you're working in an environment that is trying to be more innovative or trying to change the culture, particularly towards being more innovative, I would focus on challenge. Underpinning having great ideas is challenge. Why can't we do this? Why do we do it this way? Why is it that we can't think about something? So that concept of challenge is a real springboard for changing the way people behave. But challenge is difficult in a hierarchy. So I do acknowledge that. But be brave and be bold, and I hope everybody has a luck with changing the culture to be more innovative.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Susie and Michael, for being here and being available. And know that, you know, it's very early morning for some and afternoon for others, but thank you very much. Great conversation. Just to kind of, Susie also mentioned the Frontiers in Finance publication, and that specific edition was focused on the workplace of the future, which I think is a really valuable read with lots of interesting information. So if this is part of your interest, I suggest you really find it and read it. We'll also send out the link to the publication in the mail when we send the recording. And then if anyone would like to get hold of either Susie or Michael to continue the conversation, please contact me. I'd be happy to connect you to them. Thank you very much, and thanks again for your time, Michael and Susie.
Thank you, Freda.
Thank you.